Hello and welcome to our June webinar, There is no I in Teams. Today we're going to focus on showing you how your organisation can develop a true collaborative culture despite probably having your teams dispersed and working from home. The modern world of cloud-based technology has really been embraced as we've faced lockdown across most of the globe. Terms like Zoom, Microsoft Teams have become part of everyday language, but tools like Microsoft 365 can be used for significantly more than just video conferencing. Today we're going to be using Microsoft Teams in order to present to you. I'll just switch across to a different slide. And if you want to ask any questions, there is a live event Q&A, which is available from the meeting bar at the bottom. If you click the button there, you'll be able to ask a question to the team, both during the presentation and after, should you wish to do so. My name is John Salmons and I'm the owner of the 365 Key and former Assistant Director of ICT at Carbon Homes, based in the northeast of England. At the 365 Key, we're focused on helping organisations getting the most from their investment in Microsoft 365 technologies. We're joined today by Mark Walsh, CEO of Point Solutions, who will be demonstrating their excellent learning management system and explaining how a Microsoft 365 based LMS can help you deliver managed training programs and help ensure compliance. We also have the company of Jeff Williams, Digital Champion and Office 365 Specialist, who will be taking us through the user adoption program known as 365 Tribe. This modular program is delivered through Microsoft Teams and can help organisations quickly develop a network of champions who can get the most from their 365 investment. So the impact of the COVID-19 virus has been unlike anything we've ever seen before. Almost overnight, we found ourselves forced to work from home where we could, and field workers lost the support of centralised office functions. These challenges have created a rapid and enforced culture change that has both pros and cons, and often it's done it with minimal training and guidance due to the rapid pace of that change. The challenges that dispersed teams are likely to face focus around 7 main topics. Firstly, communication. How do we keep teams communicating when they are no longer physically together? Organisations have a communications team very often for internal and external communications, but the water cooler type communications, the inter-team communications may not be happening that well with people working from home. Task management can be difficult to keep track of, with tasks potentially either being missed or potentially duplicated by more than one member of staff. When a team's functioning well, it usually has a common purpose. Everyone understands and works towards that common purpose. So how do you keep that going when people are not able to get together for team meetings and update? Was your organisation ready for that cultural change of a modern way of working? Many organisations have been considering how to reduce office space and make staff more mobile, and these plans often were supported by large cultural change programmes over many months, if not years, certainly not over many days as we ended up doing it. Distributing work through electronic means can be very task focused and it can lose that personal touch. There are likely to be a few discussions about tasks that need doing, and the issuing of jobs via email or Teams chat or some other mechanism could come across as very impersonal and create a culture of us versus them. There is a risk also that individual employees working in their own environments develop a black box mentality, thinking only of their bit of the process and ignoring the wider picture or their place within it. And finally, keeping the social cohesion without teams nights out, quizzes, charity days, bake-off competitions, etc. can be very difficult to achieve virtually. On our webinar today, we're going to reflect specifically on how housing associations may face challenges and what I see could potentially come from that sector. So many housing associations use housing systems for their core functionality of lettings, rent, customer service and repairs, and these systems provide a good, sound, solid basis for the business process, but they very often lack flexibility or agility, and that is needed in a rapidly changing world with new rules every 3 to 4 weeks. Housing associations still need to ensure they're meeting all the compliance and regulation commitments that the regulator of social housing will be insisting on, like NROSH, boiler servicing, customer engagement. The operational services have had to adapt very, very rapidly. They need to meet the needs of working in someone's home while they're self-isolating, and protecting staff from potential infection sources has severely impacted on the ability of repairs teams to do their jobs. Indeed, predicting the needs of tenants who have been impacted by COVID-19 lockdown can be complex, as they are many and varied. Keeping that team level communication going while maintaining corporate communications about health and safety and company policies will be very difficult for a small communications team to manage. Team communication might be lost amongst many COVID-19 updates, which are obviously essential. And finally, identifying those business processes that work fine when someone could pass a bit of paper to an email, piece of paper or an email to an individual, are probably no longer fit for purpose or need to be modified in a dispersed world. So how do you keep your team engaged? It isn't all about constant video calls. These can be quite draining and time consuming. How do you involve introverts and extroverts equally without personal contact? Well, Microsoft 365 Teams can be used to share news, keep in touch and manage workloads. What we're going to do now is go over to a short demonstration where I'm going to show you a typical intranet, in this case for a housing association called TOH, and we're going to take you through some of the potential features of Microsoft Teams. So I've pre-recorded this demonstration just in case we had any technology glitches along the way, so I'm just going to click the video and run through that with you. So this is a corporate intranet, and here we can see a typical featured articles promoting corporate news items such as the 365 Champions Programme, COVID-19 information policies, corporate news articles, those types of things. So we're going to go out and click on the customer services link, and here we have a specific team intranet that's maintained by the team. It has a team level news which can be featured at the top level intranet site and is automatically rolled up by the SharePoint Site Hub system. As an example, this article here about a call center adjusted to home working is featured, and you can see it has a nice, clear, simple design which is no more complex than editing a word processing document. A lady called IVR is responsible for the team's site, and what she's done, she's added the people's links into the right-hand side for her team, and you can see here that we can pull up Justine Time, her manager, and we can show the organisation, get contact information. It's all available at the fingertips very quickly and easily. We have a YouTube video on cybersecurity and home working embedded in the team site. And at the team site level, we've also got a link to the corporate policies library that is filtered specifically with customer services scope. So you only see policies which are relevant for that particular customer service area. Ivy has identified that the team regularly use certain web pages, such as the Northumbria water leak map, to assist in diagnosis of customer problems such as no water supply. She's added these links into the right-hand side here on the top of the intranet. And she's also added a link for the new Mitel telephone system and how to use the new handsets that they've had to implement at quick need. So what I'm now going to do is pop across to Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to use the web version of Microsoft Teams here, just as I'm using my other one, obviously, to live stream this. So we're in the Microsoft Teams site, which has been created when the Customer Services Office 365 group has been set up. The Teams web client gives Ivy access to the main TOH intranet site, and also news articles have been pulled through by a SharePoint connector automatically into the Teams site. So if you look at this article here, we're able to open the customer referral COVID-19 systems article and just look at it straight away in Teams without going back to the intranet. We can also jump into the customer policies, and again we see the filtered list of customer policies in this case, and we can go straight to the home page and again look at any of the information that was available in there, including in this case all of the people information, etc. What Ivy's now going to do is she's going to go back to a function in Teams called shifts, and this lets her do rota planning and shift management. It's included in most of the Microsoft licenses, so we can see Ivy here is working on Wednesday afternoon, all day Thursday, and has booked Friday as a holiday. If we look at a different week, we can see a slightly different shift pattern for Ivy. Just jump to that one there. And what we can do in here is we can also swap shifts, we can adjust shifts, and we can make sure that they're covered automatically. So I'm going to pop across to the Android mobile SharePoint app now, and we can see the recent news articles, COVID-19 policies, etc. are on here, and the customer services intranet page automatically adjusts to fit the small screen size without any work from Ivy herself. People records are also fully accessible, which gives access to the full company directory, and you can get that on your mobile screen and all the information that we saw earlier on the full desktop version. And next we're going to jump across into Microsoft Teams app, and on this app we can see all the same information easily together in the same way that we saw this web-based solution. Tapping the More button brings up applications including the Shifts app, and we can see that Ivy is able to swap shifts, and this is managed usually with self-approval without the manager needing to be involved. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview on how we can use the Microsoft Teams system, and what I'm now going to do is hand over to Mark from Point Solutions to talk about their learning management system.
Thank you, John. As John has introduced myself, I'm Mark from Point Solutions, and we provide a learning management system that works within the Office 365 framework. We don't just provide the learning management system, we also help organizations with the provisioning and implementation of the LMS, because we accept that these kind of things can't be just plug and play, and there's a 5-point principle that we've developed to help organizations successfully implement a learning management system, and those comprise business strategy alignment, accepting that change is part of this and looking at the challenges around that, the various support and adoption programs, content and training, obviously, which is key, and then the central LMS itself that provides you with the framework. Over the recent months, we've been working with a number of housing associations, and some of the observations that we've seen, I think it's worth just highlighting a few of those before I just demonstrate the product. So what we've found is that most organizations are very focused on the compliance and regulatory training, and what that comprises obviously is the mapping of who needs what skill and what regulatory compliance element. That is all scheduled in. Obviously the training is delivered, and some of those competencies and skills obviously have a time frame, so there is renewal elements to that. So we're finding that a lot of organizations are very focused on that. They're very much managing that, even if it's in spreadsheets. They've very much got that under control. What we're also finding is that this change is necessary, and that is being driven both internally and externally. So customer expectations are now driving demand for digital communications. Organizations themselves understand that digitalizations of processes is required for operational efficiencies and productivity gains. There's obviously a requirement to react quickly. That obviously has been massively emphasized over recent months, with the need for organizations to upskill their staff on remote working and collaboration away from the office. But it's not just specific to COVID. Obviously, as and when specific training needs come to light. GDPR was another example where some organizations left it while the last minute, so they had to roll out some training pretty quickly. So there's a need for that agile and the ability to react quickly to deliver training programs. The addressing inefficient and ineffective use of data, which is mainly caused by the next point, which is seems to be quite a few disparate systems and databases that cause these issues. Also, we find some organizations are progressing using or transforming their processes digitally and working with Office 365, and where they're finding successes with that, then they want to widen that adoption. And also the key elements we always, that the focus is on employees and making sure that they're at the core of everything. We're also finding that L&D departments specifically are keen to support the operational and line of business skills development, and there are some challenges around that, in the fact that they need to understand the processes and what challenges the line of business managers are encountering. And then once they understand those challenges, they need to align them to the business objectives in order that they can get some relative assessments out of whatever learning they can provide to support the line of business managers. In terms of how those programs are delivered as well, there's an acceptance that there's an element of structured and unstructured learning that's required. So learners that are either new to the organisation or are relatively junior in their learning structures need the system to guide them and need a framework to guide them through their learning. Where the more experienced employees and experienced learners, they seem to require a more unstructured learning environment where it's on demand. They need some knowledge or they need an upskill at the point of need, and they just need a mechanism or a framework that allows them to actually go and get the information that they need when they need it. And also the acceptance that the service the different learning needs. So people obviously learn in different ways. So in terms of the classroom or the online training, or whether it's just videos or self training, then there are different ways people like to consume it on a mobile or maybe on a desktop or in a lunch hour. So all those factors need to be considered. And also the key aspect of it in terms of the line of business, supporting the organisation and the line of business learning, is how do you measure that and the impact of that learning, again tying that back to the business objectives. Excuse me. So there is very much a desire to support and deliver these upskills programs aimed at the business process element rather than the compliance element. And some of the examples where we've seen things working well are delivering pilot programs to build a business case. So where there is maybe some nervousness around this, then you can build a business case by delivering a pilot. And our recommendation, and where we've seen that, is don't build a pilot around staff that are engaged. You need to adopt a broad spectrum of the organisation or representative cultures of the organisation. So maybe the change-averse person, maybe the person that's not as technically equipped with the modern tools, as well as the people that obviously would put their hand up straight away to enter into something like this. What you get from that is the fact that obviously you'll have the challenges and you will work through the challenges, and that builds part of the case. There's an acceptance that change is involved, and some people may be a bit more reluctant than others, but you can demonstrate how you address that. And also utilise and link a champion support base. So L&D departments themselves can't just roll this out across the organisation. They need the support within the business, and so identifying a champions network that may be strategically positioned around the organisation is another area where we've seen work, and I know Jeff from 365 Tribe is going to explain a little bit more around that. What we're finding is that champions programs can be delivered in different contexts. So a champion could be a technical champion, so they could be an expert in Teams or an expert in Power BI. They could be role-based champions, so they may be where they may be in customer services, and they'll be using things like Teams and Planner, and they'll become the champion for that role for other people within those similar roles can actually go to. And also process is another example of a champion context where it may be a champion around a particular process or that are strategically placed around the organisation. So those are some of the challenges and the observations that we've observed as part of implementing learning management systems, not only into housing associations, but across many markets. So what I'm going to go on to show you now is just how some of the features within the LMS can help address some of those challenges. So we talked about the compliance and regulation, so we can see how an LMS can manage that, sort of consolidating and aggregating all the information that you might have in individual spreadsheets. We obviously accept or understand the fact that there are many teams involved in that, in terms of line managers, scheduling teams, L&D, and this plethora of data that seems to be around organisations can be consolidated into one LMS around compliance, and also building things called building upskill personas. A persona is basically a package of learning where you can put together a whole raft of learning that is in a structured and provides a structured learning pathway. We can also demonstrate how the more experienced learners can find the information they need via the on-demand search, and also surface some of the data insights that you get from an LMS that tells you, which content is most prominent, how long it's taking users to get through certain content, how people are connecting and learners are connecting to the system, at what times of the day are they connecting. So this might help when you're creating a strategy around how you're pushing your learning out there. If they're consuming it at lunchtime, then it may be better fit from a mobile device rather than a desktop device. So all this sort of insight helps you design your L&D strategy. And then also, how do we connect into a champions network? Frequently asked questions to help, and how do we connect into the teams and the channels where the champions are based, and where the knowledge can be shared. So we're going to got a brief demonstration on a learning management system that will show you some of this. Okay, here we have the Learning Point 365 learning management application that works within the Office 365 environment. As part of the presentation, we discuss compliance and regulatory training, and I will just show you a few features to support that within the application. We have the My PDR, My Personal Development Roadmap. This is a roadmap that is assigned to each particular role. It showcases the skills and competencies relevant to the roles defined within your organization. It allows you to classify them. In this example, we have best practice and statutory learning. And also it shows where I am at in terms of attaining the particular or the individual skills. This one I have attained, these ones I am working towards, and these I have yet to start. It also allows me to filter by classification, so if I just want to look at the statutory, then I can filter and see my risk. The learning personas themselves, which are packs of learning, can support governance and also guide learners in respect to intuitive learning. Here, a learner can see the skills and competencies they require, and under each one is a list of tasks that they need to complete in order to attain each specific skill or competency. The output of this, from an individual perspective, shows them their learning timeline. It shows them the skills they have, the skills they're working on, and also if the skill has a shelf life, it'll show the expiry date of that skill. And they can also see individually the skills that they have. We also spoke within the presentation about L&D departments supporting the organisation in delivering learning and development and training around line of business challenges to help upskill staff to improve each individual area. The personas support that as well. Here you can see a drill engineer. So a persona can be created around a particular engineering role, and all the learning required for that role can be allocated, and again can guide the individual through the individual tasks. Other contexts in terms of how to create personas. You can create personas, in this example, an electrician may, as John was demonstrating in the presentation, use Microsoft Teams shift management application to manage shifts. So the electrician may require some training around how to use this particular application as part of their role. So it's not training necessarily around their whole role, just specific areas and specific processes as well. And you can also do it in a way whereby it may be fairly high level or generic training around, for instance, management training. So all managers within the organization go through certain aspects of training regardless of what management role they are fulfilling. So the personas themselves can be formed from many different contexts. John also showed you the SharePoint communication sites and how they could be used as an intranet and in, say, collaboration and communication within the organization. You can also use those communication sites to build learning content sites. And here I have an example. So as you can see here, we've built quite a simple site. It's very easy to build. This is showcasing the training calendar. So as an individual, I'm routed to the training calendar. I can see the courses. I can review the most applicable one for myself, and I can book on the course. I can also, as part of the communication sites, add supporting information, supporting documentation. I can add chat features so learners can collaborate around the same area of learning. You can include feedback forms to get feedback on the learning. So the options create quite a powerful content management tool for your learning as an alternative to linking individual tasks to the skills. So both the personas and the SharePoint communication sites provide some structure around learning where individuals need to be guided and instructed as part of their learning. There's also the need for what we call unstructured learning requirements, where more experienced individuals just require the ability to find the information they need at the point of need, on-demand learning. So we have a number of features within the LMS to support that. We have the general search feature. We also have the learning catalog, where I can find within here, for instance, if I'm looking for something to do with Microsoft Planner, it shows me the personas that Planner is part of. It shows me the skills associated with Planner. And also, if there is any learning content, it will surface the learning content as well. If the organization is delivering a champions program to strategically place people around the organization to support L&D, Teams is quite a common area to build this champions network. And again, how you build the teams and the context can be different depending on which organization or depending on your organizational needs. So examples here are, you may build a champion team around a particular application like the Power Platform. So anybody got any questions within the organization who are using Power BI or Power Apps can come into the team. It may be a more generic team. So just a general digital upskill team. So any questions around Office 365 go to this team. It could be split by organizational unit or department. So you're positioning people within each area of the business to support the staff in that area with their digital upskill. And another example is by location. There are other examples, and you can use a combination of all of these. Ultimately, it allows the learners to post questions where they may be struggling or want further information, and it'll create a post, and then the natural features of, or the standard features of chat within the teams take over. So the champions are alerted to the fact that a question's been raised, they can answer a question, questions can be rated, answers can be rated, sorry, and also the learner gets notified of any answers. From a learner point of view, the way that they interact with this is they can interact from within the learning management system. So they can, from the right-hand slider, they can ask for help, they can ask a question. Initially, the search bot will look at the FAQ database to see if it can provide any answers that are within the area of the question being asked. If it can't, it's at that point that it would post a chat into one of the teams for the champions to pick up an answer. The question and answer process around this bot organically builds the FAQ database as well. So as the more questions answered, the more questions asked, sorry, the more questions answered, the more informed your FAQ database will be. The last area I want to touch on is the data analysis side. So you've seen already from an individual point of view, they can look at their own skills timeline, but from a management point of view, they can also dip into the skills matrix, which is organizational wide. This is security driven. So depending on where you sit in the organization and your security policies will depend on what information you see through this skills matrix. Ultimately, what it allows you to see your direct reports or your indirect reports, or you can search across the organization, again, given the right security policies. So the organizational structure here, I can select by department or by job title or in a particular country or a particular office. And also I can filter by particular skills I'm looking for. So if we have a large project and I'm looking for somebody within the organization that's got Prince 2 project management skills, then I can filter out people who have got those skills. But ultimately, having keyed all the criteria in, it returns the people that fit that criteria and the skills and the status of the skills that they have. So are they working on the skills, have they got the skills, etc. Another element of the analysis is to use Power BI. So here we have a Power BI chart that is plugged into the learning data. So within the learning management system, we know who's got what skills, we know what skills learners are working towards and when they're expected to attain those skills, and we know when skills that they have are due to expire. We also have the option for organizations to create their own skills planning map. And this allows you to see at an organizational objective level if you have the necessary skills within the business. So if I select security essentials, for instance, it'll show me whether we have got sufficient skills around this particular organizational objective. And as you can see in December, we seem to have a bit of a gap. The value of this data is increased if you can also plug it into your HR database. So if you can pull in information around absenteeism, so if somebody is off long-term absence, so although the LMS system would show that that individual does have the necessary skills, they're not available to the business at this point in time because they're off long-term absence, maybe on maternity leave. Similarly with offboarding, the LMS would show people with skills who are working for the business, but the HR system would be able to tell us that actually this individual is leaving in 1 month, and so those skills will be lost to the business in 1 month's time. And conversely, you could point it at your recruitment database to analyze what skills you're looking to attract into the business. All that data together provides you with a very powerful trend and forecast analysis linked in to your business objectives. So this is really where L&D can start to support the business in a proactive way. So I hope you feel that that's offered some insight into what an LMS can provide for an organization in their digital upskill and wider governance and compliance learning. So following the demonstration there's a couple of slides with some resources that may be of use. We will be sending out the recording of the session, and we can send out the links to these resources as well, which might help with your planning and strategy around a digital learning strategy. Okay. Thank you for your time on that. I'm now going to hand back to John, who's going to demonstrate now about how some of the Office 365 applications can be used jointly in the power of many, I believe. Back to you, John.
So thanks for that, Mark. Sorry you weren't able to join us and had a few technical issues there, but as Jeff said, we'll edit the recording and drop in the demonstration so you can watch that on catch up. I know the product has a lot more depth and functionality, so if you want to see a full demonstration, once you've had a look at that webinar catch up, then please fill out on the feedback form, and Mark, I'm sure, will be very happy to do that. So one of the main benefits of the Microsoft 365 platform is to encourage agility and innovation by colleagues using the component parts to connect together and create solutions. So what I'm going to have a look at now, if I can find my mouse, which is over there, I think, yes, is I'm going to show you how we can use a number of products linked together. So in this case, Microsoft Teams, Planner, SharePoint, Power Automate, and Power Apps in a simple solution to attract customer referrals due to the COVID lockdown. So we're now going to go over across to, again, another pre-recorded demonstration. So here we are. So we're in our customer services team intranet in this case, and what we have is a simple SharePoint list, and you're going to see a lot more about lists because Microsoft have now separated this out into a new branded product called Microsoft Lists. Very imaginative, and we'll be seeing that probably from the autumn onwards. So this list is an out-of-the-box experience. It hasn't got an awful lot of customization. So if we edit the record we've got here, you'll see we've got a pretty bland form, quite complex to follow, not really very well laid out. And that's what you would get in a standard SharePoint form. However, with a little bit of magic behind the scenes, what we've done here is we've customized the form using Microsoft Power Apps, and you can see it's a much nicer form. We can put graphics on it, we can do lookups lists, we can do cross-reference to other data, and we can also use things like pick lists for dates. So we're now across to Android, and what we're going to do is have a look at the Android mobile experience. So this is Power Apps again, and we're loading the application, and we can see all the same information that we had previously. So we can open up this record here for Mr. William Windsor and get information on our referral data for there. And we can also click the plus button at the top here, and we can fill in a new card, in which case this particular one we're going to create for Mrs. Jane Johnson and report her as needing a rent payment holiday request and the fact that she's had to unfortunately go into hospital. So there's the rent payment holiday request going in, and there is the hospital notification. So saving that will automatically drop it into our lists. So if we scroll down, we can see it in there. And I can jump back into Microsoft Teams now on the desktop, and we can cross-reference to the customer referral screen. So I can see in here that that entry has been added. I'm now going to jump into another product called Planner, and Microsoft Planner is a bit like a Kanban board. It is a Kanban board, and you can see tasks in here. So in our to-do bucket, we have a task, and that is Mrs. Jane Johnson requesting permission, requesting assistance. So what that's done is that's automatically come through from Power Automate, and the list has generated a task in Planner. We can fill in the task, we can assign it to IVR. There she is. Click on that from there, make sure that it's set to in progress. You can see also we have tabs down the side so we can color code things. It's a very powerful product planner and getting more and more powerful by the day. And drop this into doing, and now we can easily see all of the tasks that are being done by those particular people, and we can actually update the record again and open it from here. You'll also note that we have a link in here, and what we've done is we've embedded a link straight to the Power App SharePoint list. And we can jump straight into the primary system from there if we wanted to edit that record without having to go and find it in a separate application. So what we're going to do now is very briefly have a quick look at the Power Automate environment. And Power Automate is a flow system. It used to be called Flow for doing different changes, etc. And what it will do in here is when an item is created, it's going to create a task. It's going to automatically fill in the tenant name. I'm just going to pause that slightly because I'm slightly behind there. And it will create a start date of the created date for the record. What we're then going to do is update the task list. And so we're going to go back into that task afterwards. So having created it, we need to put some additional information on. And that particular information that we're going to add on is a link to the items. So everything is fully integrated. And all of the things I'm showing you in here are included with most Microsoft 365 licenses. So that will pull through the tenant name. Oops, let's just go back to that. Okay, so tenant names being created in there, update the task, and you can see the link to the team coming into here. And then we would save that and publish it. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of Power Automate and what's possible to do with the product. So what I'm now going to do is hand over to Jeff. So I'll just stop sharing my screen so that he can take control again. And Jeff's going to take you through the 365 Tribe offering.
Thanks, John. Just give me a moment to reorganize my screens as I was on a different screen earlier. Excellent. Okay, so thank you. Yes, so let's have a look at adoption of Office 365 then. So firstly, is adoption easy? There's kind of two different camps to this, and we've got different things that fall into each particular section as well. So if we start off by looking at the no side, so in terms of the challenges that we have, there are more apps than ever before in Office 365 or Microsoft 365 as it's now being rebranded. So some of the things that we might have are, does everybody know which app does? When should you use each app? So often there's multiple options as to which app you would use for a particular task. So John mentioned lists, for example. So we've got Microsoft Lists coming along, which we can use for tracking lists and to-do type items, but we already have an app called To-Do. We already have Outlook Tasks, we already have OneNote, and we already have Planner. So actually all of those could be used for tracking to-do type items. So which would be the best option for that particular use scenario, and also who supports each app. So because there are so many apps, it may be that the IT department can't actually support the full range of apps that are available. There's also a really rapid pace of change across Office 365. New updates are coming out almost on a weekly basis at the moment, and this probably particularly applies to Microsoft Teams. So I know just in the last couple of months we've had a whole heap of different changes come through, including things like tags, including things like live captions, changing the screen format to 3x3. The hand up feature in Teams meetings, and that's just within the last few months. So an ever growing list of changes, and of course we're all really busy as well. So I think that goes without saying. You could probably also add into that the fact that the challenges that the current lockdown situation has caused for different people. On the positive side, existing apps are becoming less complex. So a good example of that would be perhaps SharePoint. So if you were a SharePoint user several years ago, it was probably a really specialist app and quite hard to use for your average user. And even some of the limitations around things like file names, so you couldn't include an ampersand in a file name, for example, whereas you now can. But SharePoint Online now is a worlds apart from what SharePoint used to be like from a usage perspective before. The new apps that come in, so things like Planner, which is a relatively new app, are generally really intuitive and are much easier to pick up. So you could argue that actually helps on the adoption side because it's easier to use the new apps as they come along. And I think the other thing to get people excited about Office 365 is there are hundreds and hundreds of different sort of that is amazing type features that people are generally blown away. So that could be whether you're using the meeting notes option in OneNote, or perhaps using something like the background removal in Word or PowerPoint. So tasks that would have been really complex before, where perhaps you would have needed something like Photoshop in the example of that background removal. You not only would you have needed Photoshop, but you would have needed to have been really skilled at it as well. So we've kind of got these two different sides of the story here. So some bits actually make adoption really hard, and some bits actually make adoption a little easier than it was previously. So what's the best way of achieving our overall adoption? So the first one is to listen. So we need to understand how people work and explain to them how they can overcome any frustrations that they have. So certainly those that have been, maybe SharePoint's a good example here, for example. So if you'd have used SharePoint in years gone by, lots of people would have got to the point where they just couldn't cope with the system, found it just so unintuitive to use and really difficult to manage. So overcome their frustrations, and part and parcel of that is actually taking feedback. So listen to what those people are saying and advise ways that we can help them. So come up with solutions to the challenges that they have. And part and parcel of that is also building enthusiasm. And those that bit that I mentioned just now, with the hundreds of amazing moments in Office 365, can really help with that enthusiasm part. We also need to take some actions as well, in particular to break old habits. So in many cases, people have rolled out Office 365 and all of the users have ended up working in exactly the same way as they did previously. They've kind of ignored all this new functionality they've now got available, and they've just carried on working in the same way as they did before. So they were still saving their files to a network file share, or maybe onto the desktop of their individual computer and that kind of thing. So one of the ways that we can avoid that is by actually taking those options away. So we should have scheduled into the whole adoption process, the whole rollout process, to actually remove those options and kind of force people across onto using the new systems. As part and parcel of that as well, we can also reward their new habits. So explain the benefits, get them to change, and then reward that accordingly. And in terms of how we can support them through that process, then it really is an ongoing process. So it's not a one-off. We don't deliver training at the rollout stage, maybe even have a group of champions, a champions network for the initial launch. That really doesn't work. It needs to be an ongoing process over at least a year, probably multiple years. So one of the ways that we can help with that is to provide ongoing training and also an ongoing champions network that's supported throughout the whole process. So that's obviously something us at 365 Tribe specialise in, and we've got some cases here of things that we've actually seen going wrong as we've gone through the process in the past. So these are things to avoid, if you like. So sometimes you end up with the wrong champions recruited, so that they haven't got the right mindset. Maybe they're not particularly interested in learning, or if they do learn, bear in mind that the whole aspect of a champion is that they are meant to support those around them. It's not just an individual training program. That wouldn't be a suitable champion. So sometimes we actually get the wrong champions recruited up front, and that's a really important part of the overall process. People that don't have time to learn. So everybody has time to learn. I think life is a learning process in general. But those that say that they don't have time to learn probably won't actually make the time to learn, which is a real shame, because if they did, they'd probably end up actually saving time by using some of the new features. But there are some people that fall into that category, so that wouldn't be a good choice as a champion either. Some people that have, if you like, had a bad experience previously. So there are those that perhaps might say that they hate SharePoint because of an experience they had with SharePoint 7 or 8 years ago when it was a completely different product. So they're not necessarily the wrong champion to have, because you can turn them round and show them the benefits of the new system and how much it's changed. So that's one of the challenges that we do sometimes come across, is people relying on their previous experience. People that have seen no benefits of the new system. So as part and parcel of the whole adoption process, we really do need to stress the benefits and get people to buy into the benefits. And actually, generally, that's quite easy, because as you start showing people how they can do things more easily using Office 365 and the full suite of programs that we now have available to us, then often that problem goes away. Some champions might lose interest, so they're really excited at the start of the program, that they are really enthusiastic. They find that they're learning lots, but then over time that interest drops off. So that's where it's really important that we keep supporting the champions through the whole process and keep providing new content. So more training, more tips, if you like, on the different apps that we have available. Sometimes you might come across a champion that 6 months after we've gone live with a system, they're then asking how they log in. So they clearly haven't used it in the last 6 months at all. So again, that doesn't make a great champion. Hopefully we would pick that up at an earlier stage. So for our champions programs, we do actually monitor the usage that people are making of the programs. Are they accessing the training resources and so on? But if they're still, despite all of the poking and prodding, that they're still not logging in or stop actively participating, then that might not be the right champion to have. And the best champions we have in the program often leave, because often they're actually our best people and they might move on to a different role or something like that. And that's absolutely fine, because actually they are still taking all of that knowledge with them and spreading it around the business. So these are just some of the things to watch out for as we go through the course of a champions program. So what can we do to help our champions to make them more engaged, to help them with the adoption of the overall Office 365 suite? So one is give them more knowledge. So that's one of the key points. So we typically would have regular webinars, as well as a load of short video training courses that are really short nuggets, or typically 1 to 4 minutes. So easy to consume. Lots of extra things like tips that we publish into our champions program on a regular basis to not only improve their knowledge, but also that builds onto the next point as well. So we really help to build their enthusiasm as well. We also give them some recognition for the training and the learning they're actually doing, and I'll show you that in a moment. But we basically, as somebody completes a course, they actually earn a digital badge that they can then display in their email signature, for example. And we help to build a sense of community. So not only are we training the champions and helping the champions, but they're also helping each other and also helping people within the wider business. That's kind of the whole point of the champions program in the first place. So for our champions programs, we actually run the champions program in Teams itself. And it's a 3-stage process. So we obviously, there's a learn phase where people need to acquire that knowledge about a particular topic. Then we ask them to complete a challenge, which is a way that they can demonstrate that knowledge in a real world type scenario. And then we ask them to complete a knowledge check, which is a short 10-question multiple choice questionnaire, just to validate that they have become truly expert in that particular program. They do have in-depth knowledge of it. And then once they complete that and pass it, they'll get sent this digital badge like so. So rather than show you any more PowerPoint, I think I'm going to jump out of that and we'll jump straight into an example of a live champions program. So this is with Carbon Homes, John's former employer, and this is our champions program that we have running for these guys at the moment. So you can see we have separate channels for each of the core apps that we list. So this is phase 1 of the program. So we do typically break the champions program down into 4 phases. So there are so many apps in Office 365. I think it was 36 the last time I counted. So that's too much to train all in one go. So we break it down into sections, and this is the phase 1 part. Within each of these channels, we then have separate tabs at the top of our screen. So we have a Learn tab, for example, which takes people through an introduction to the program. We have a list of events that are coming up. And then we have links to these short video tutorials that I mentioned just now. So we can see these are all very specific on a particular topic, typically 1 to 4 minutes, depending on the actual subject and so on. So this, in conjunction with the live webinars and so on, is how they acquire their knowledge. And then we ask them to complete a challenge to prove that they have become expert in that particular program. So this asks them to apply it in a particular process. In this particular case, we asked them to create a channel, to add some tabs to the channel, to email a message into the channel, and so on and so forth. We also have an Ask the Experts channel where people can ask any questions that they may have that are related to the apps within Office 365, and then the 365 Tribe team, as well as the incumbent IT team, will answer any questions that they may have. And just finally on this bit, the final bit I will show you. So I mentioned the rewards that people get, so they get these badges. We also publish this as a league table. So we call it the Champions League, and as people earn their badges for a particular topic, then this will get added onto the Champions League table, and this again provides a bit of enthusiasm to drive people towards achieving. So you can see we've got lots of people here that have already achieved some badges. Some of these people have been running in the Champions program for a couple of months now, so that's why they've managed to accumulate all of the badges that they have. So that's a general summary of the Champions program process, and I think just to go back to what some of our champions have said, the feedback that they've given us. So I'm not going to read all of these out, but you'll see some examples on the screen there. So there's a mention in the top right hand quote up here that being part of that community, so encouraging that community spirit is key. We've also, for example, this one down here, I think maybe Office 365 isn't so scary after all. So that's a nice bit of feedback, and that's typical of what people that are new to Office 365 sometimes feel, that it's a bit overwhelming. There's so many different apps, so many different choices. Which app should I use when, and so on. So that's our Champions program. Just some feedback from some of our clients. So Microsoft have supported us with a number of clients as well, and the feedback they've had from their clients is that it's been really successful. So excellent. Hopefully that's been a useful introduction into our Champions programs, and I will now hand back to John. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and then I'll hand back to John.
Okay,
to just share your desktop.
Yep.
Okay, got it now.
Got it now? Great, excellent. Okay, well, thanks for that, Jeff. It's great to see my ex-colleagues embracing the program and so many badges as well. That's excellent. So as you can see, cultural change and education is absolutely critical for successful implementation and ongoing adoption of that Microsoft 365 platform. So what have I learned from working with Microsoft 365, both in my housing career and also more recently under the umbrella of the 365 key? Well, the first thing is that change absolutely must be led from the top. This biggest change that 365 needs is a cultural one. The technology is really only 15 to 20% of the story. I got possibly slightly ridiculed at Carbon Homes occasionally for keep repeating that message, but it really is the case. I spent nearly a year saying that we've got to do the cultural piece first. That is most important. I think another one that I learned, which I probably learned a little bit late before I left Carbon Homes, but is that ICT needs to let go. And yes, you've got to ensure system integrity, and that is important, that you're not getting little pop-up solutions which are competing with core systems or possibly even storing data outside of core systems. But it's very important that the ICT team are seen as agile and supportive and responsive to colleagues working and developing on that solutions platform. The use of Teams as a learning platform is also essential to reinforce the collaborative learning. I think the way that 365 tried, embed that in, encourages people to use the product and also gets them to see the power of the product and the potential of the product. So Teams is all about building that community, and it's been essential to get the most from that solution. And certainly I know that Carbon Homes have embraced Teams very much in the current situation. Life is a constant learning journey. Colleagues need to understand their learning paths and personas, and a good learning management system can provide that in an integrated environment. And the great thing about integrating as many products as you can into that 365 system and the Active Directory is single sign-on, same system for security, you don't need to worry about that, and it's a familiar platform to people once you've done the basic training. And Microsoft 365 constantly evolves, and that's something, as Jeff said, there are many ways to do the same thing. You just got to look at the number of features that have been added to Teams in the last months. We've got a 3x3 grid, so we've now got 9 videos. With I found out yesterday that they're talking about taking that to 49 to compete with Zoom. You've got your raise hand feature. You've got so many new things that are appearing on almost a daily basis. You've just got to live with it and accept that is changing. It's a bit scary for the IT team, the thought that literally they may come in one morning and find that the product's behaving slightly differently and they're going to get some calls on the service desk or help desk. But it's a brave new world, and it's one that involves only one constant, and that is change. So thank you for your time today. Sorry we had a few technical issues as we were going along. We're available now to take any questions you may have, so please use the Q&A for that. And as Jeff said, we'll make the live stream available to you probably in the next 2 or 3 days.
Just to let everybody know, on a Teams live event, there is a delay of around 30 seconds or so between what you see and what we see. So just if you ask a question and don't get an immediate response, it's probably down to that delay. But please do type any questions that you have within that Q&A box, and John and I will answer them. Doesn't look like we've got any questions coming through at the minute, but we will stick around for the final few minutes of the session. Thanks for that, John. I thought that was really helpful, and I'm sure lots of people will have learned a lot from that. I particularly like the way that you were using the Power Automate and also the where you'd had the Power Apps to customize your SharePoint forms. That was good.
Yeah, it's really easy to do now, Jeff. In particular, there's integration straight from SharePoint into the Power Apps Screen Designer. So you can literally just click on a button and say customize in Power Apps, and it takes you straight in there. So it's really, really good from that point of view.
Okay, excellent. So I might ask you to answer this one as well, John, and I'll give my own answer. But we've had a question from Steve Bird. What's the most interesting piece of self-innovation you've seen with 365?
I think the one that I reacted to the most was quite interesting is at Carbon Homes, they coming together as an amalgamation of organizations. They had a number of different appraisal schemes, annual appraisal schemes. So they needed quite quickly to turn around a common document. So a Word document was produced. And unbeknown to me, somebody in the learning and development team in HR actually started to, so I'll just share my video back again, started to develop a little customized form version for the trade staff, because obviously they needed an easier version to use on their mobile devices. And I knew nothing about it until a senior management team demonstration when the head of HR, assistant director, Ian, shared it. And my initial reaction was, oh God, that's going to go into a SharePoint spreadsheet. That's going to be stored in a OneDrive. I need to be. And so my immediate reaction from IT was, hang on, there's a problem here. And I was just about to verbalize that when I thought, no, embrace the innovation. Let's think about how we can get the data where we need it. She's gone out, she's done something, she's used what she's learned. In fact, she used things she'd actually found out beyond the program at that stage and innovated with the product. And what was interesting is watching the rest of my colleagues that said, can we not ditch the Word version and just use this version that we've done on Microsoft Forms? And yeah. I thought that was great. But it was also a learning point for me, Jeff, because it was a case of in my initial reaction was to block. No, you can't do that because. But I by stepping back, that innovation was encouraged, and I could have just killed it dead probably there if I'd have wanted to, also being in a senior role, but I'm glad I didn't. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So that probably leads on to Steve's next question, which is how you embed that change over control into the ICT department. So I'll give you a minute or so to think of the answer for that, whilst I come back with my answer to the first bit around the self-innovation. For me, I think one of the real game changers in Office 365 is co-authoring. So being able to edit the same document at the same time as somebody else. We have one document that's stored in one place, and we can all just access it simultaneously. So I've often worked as part of project teams where we've had an Excel spreadsheet that was, if you like, an action tracker or a project tracker that was emailed around to everybody. They all updated their bit and then emailed it back, and somebody copied and pasted it all into a master version of that document. All of that has gone away now. All of the potential risks of copying the wrong bit or using the wrong version and so on and so forth. So now we just have the single document that's stored in Teams. We can all access it together. We just make our updates when we can. We don't need to wait for the email, etc., etc. So that's a real game changer for me.
Yeah,
I'll let you onto the ICT department, Pete.
Yes, just to come back on the co-authoring, I was trying to encourage the PAs to actually type up minutes while the meeting was going on, so that actually the people in the room could see the summaries as they were working on them, and therefore they could correct them straight away. The minutes could go straight out at the end of the meeting. Co-authoring is, particularly in the dispersed and distributed world, is fantastic. It's such a useful product. In terms of embedding the change in the ICT department, it's about getting ICT, I think, to see that it isn't a threat, and get them on board with getting people to generate ideas. So I had a team when I worked at Carbon of 3 people that worked on Office 365. I was very passionate about it, probably because prior to becoming the assistant director, I actually ran the SharePoint program and was the project manager for SharePoint. So did an awful lot of training and very aware of the SharePoint product and saw the potential of 365. So I think it is about embracing that and getting them to understand it isn't a threat. And they do have some control over making sure that we get integrity of data. So it's talking about API feeds into the core system so that you don't lose data stored in a SharePoint list and it's not being seen into the core system. And bringing that enthusiasm back, getting them involved in the Champions program. We probably should have got the service desk a little bit more involved early on, I think, on the Champions program, put them through the Champions program. But it is, for me, it's about making them see it's not a threat. So it's working very closely with them, getting them on side initially, but it's cultural change for them as it is for everybody else.
I agree completely. Doesn't look like we have any other questions come through. So we're just about out of time anyway, so I think we'll wrap up. It's a big thank you from me for joining us, and my apologies as well for the few technical issues we had, but we will resolve that in the recording. And I'm sure you want to say thanks as well, John.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And if you've got any questions or anything, I think we're going to be sending out a small feedback form, and feel free to put them on there, and we're happy to have a chat and take things further if you want to.